we are not talking here about robust debate, however robust it is. We are talking about mindless abuse. And in my case, the mindless abuse has been characteristically racist and sexist. And just to outline, I've had death threats, I've had people tweeting that I should be hung if, quotes, they could find a tree big enough to take the fat bitch's weight. There was an EDL-affiliated Twitter account, hashtag burn Diane Abbott. I've had rape threats, described as a pathetic, useless, fat, black piece of shit, ugly, fat, black bitch, and nigger. Nigger over and over again. And one of my members of staff said that when people ask her, what is the most surprising thing about coming to work for me? The most surprising thing for her is how often she has to read the word nigger. And this comes in through emails, through Twitter, through Facebook.
Good afternoon. That was Diane Abbott speaking in 2017. I'm sorry to start the show like that, but I think that's the context that we're talking about here. This racism against Diane Abbott has been going on at a terrible level for a long time. As I say, that was in 2017, and I'd like you to think of what also happened in 2017, because this was an exchange on WhatsApp between Labour staff in 2017. At the same time, Diane Abbott was describing that, in which they are laughing about Abbott found crying in the loos, Abbott Memorial cupboard works well, telling the media where Diane Abbott was, and then using racist tropes, calling Diane Abbott an angry woman, and a colleague calling her repulsive. At the same time, other WhatsApp messages revealed Dawn Butler, good grief, did she not accuse the Labour Party and its staff of being racist this week? Nice. Harriet White Privilege Harmon, a joke by Emily Oldknow. Now, this show is about why Labour has not acknowledged that racism against black people, against black women especially. The Forde Report actually outlined that racism. And on this show, I'm going to be speaking to black women who have experienced this kind of racism locally and nationally within the party, so that we can see that it isn't just Diane Abbott who's been getting this treatment. And I'm going to start with a recording I made last night with Ekua Bayunu. The fact that you've left the Labour Party to join the Greens doesn't seem like a very good indication that Labour's been doing very well for you. Is there aspects of racism within the reason that you have left?
Both. In terms of personally and locally, very definitely, the treatment I've received at the hands of a very substantial Labour group. When I joined, it was 94 out of 96 councillors were Labour. But the least socialist environment you could enter as socialist. And I was really made clear to me, but the way that it was made clear to me was racist. So I had a meeting before I left with the new leader of the council, and she said, "Are you sure it wasn't just factionalism? Like, that's okay to be bullied, it's factionalism." And I went, "I think you might find it's a complicated version, a mixture of the two." And I think it is, because one allows or gives permission. My politics gave permission for the pile-on, but the type of pile-on was racist. So how do you split those two things?
Right, I see. Yeah, so so that you can't. You can say that it's both at the same time. And what did you make of the? Did you read the Forde Report? What he wrote about?
I've left the Labour Party, so I did not sit down and read the full report. What I've read are excerpts, particularly around the anti-black racism. I mean, most of it was in the leaked report, I'd have to say. There wasn't, I don't think, substantially new findings. He just shared them and shared there isn't the detail. So many of us waited a long time because we'd submitted our own evidence, our own experiences to the Forde Report, which can be quite, on one hand, if it had come quickly and had been done efficiently, it would have been quite liberating and would have sort of been part of what we hope would be challenge and change. But the extensive time that it's taken and the sort of what I feel from what I've read, the sort of weakness of, oh, there were issues on both sides type thing is, I mean, broadly, because it's not just about anti-Black racism in terms of what's in there. It makes it, I feel it could have had more teeth, but I understand and appreciate that a lot of my colleagues who are staying in the Labour Party, my Black, especially Labour Black Socialists and others, are really fighting to get the content of the report acknowledged. Because for me, there's nothing new. We'd read already of the abuse that, for instance, Diane Abbott was receiving. We'd read already of that sort of general sense of what was happening at the parliamentary level, but we were all experiencing it at local level. I think you're going to be speaking to Marcia. She's much more articulate about some of the detail of what we went through. We were very much targeted as two Black women, but I can give you an example of what happened locally and why it sort of mirrors what happens at the national level, at the parliamentary level. When things had gotten, I was probably 6 months into the sort of horrors of being a councillor on the Labour group and the treatment I was receiving, I had written in the Labour group email strand that they needed to stop the bullying of Black women councillors. I just wrote, you need to stop. Marcia was on sick leave. She resigned not long after that. Their response was to issue me with what they called my third and final warning and threat of removal of whip. They didn't investigate. They didn't ask me what was my evidence for the bullying of Black women. They issued me. It's in the wider world where real law, where the lawlessness of politics doesn't exist. It's called victimization. If someone raises a complaint, to then attack the complainant rather than investigating the complaint, that is the sort of typical action that was taken against me. And in fact, I think that mirrors very much. It's like there's permission within the Labour Party at local level as well to behave really badly. It seeps through. It's like it's disease, and I don't think it's recoverable personally.
We're joined by Marcia Hutchinson, who was mentioned there by Ekua, and also was a councillor in Manchester, but resigned, stepped down. Thank you for coming on, Marcia. What was your experience as a councillor in Manchester? I mean, Ekua was describing being disciplined for actually pointing out that there was racist practice. I mean, that's I can't get my head around that.
Yeah, I mean, it starts long before I became a councillor. I joined the Labour Party in 2016 and left in 2021. So I was a member for 5 years, of which the last 6 months I was a councillor. And I can safely say in my entire life, I've experienced more racism in the Labour Party than the rest of my life put together. And I've been around the block a few times.
Wow. So we're thinking Labour should be supporting and working to help people who are black women, especially, who are being attacked, as we've heard from those messages that Diane Abbott received. And actually, Labour's worse than the people out there in some ways.
Yeah, I definitely say so, because the racism was much more explicit within the Labour Party. Lots of things that happen in the outside world, you think, was it, wasn't it? Not entirely sure. And I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who spent 20 years working in cultural diversity. I produced educational resources for schools to promote diversity. I was awarded an MBE in 2010 for services to cultural diversity. I've worked on or published over 20 textbooks. So I would consider myself an expert, not just lived experience, but professional experience. And yet I was subjected to the kind of racism that I didn't think existed. The kind of racism where people do appalling things like Ekua and myself were the only 2 candidates to be women's officer for Manchester Labour Party, which is made up of 5 CLPs. So it sits above the 5 CLPs. We were the only 2 candidates. And at the AGM, 8 of the 53 people in the room, so they were voting live in the same room as myself, wrote derogatory comments on the ballot papers, folded them and put them in the ballot box. The comments were things like, they're both shite, neither, rerun selections. Now, they were doing this with me in the room. And when we complained about it, we got the same factionalism. Oh, you're sure it was racism? In fact, the outgoing chair, who herself is a woman of colour, spoke to the whole meeting and said, this is disgusting, it's appalling, this shouldn't happen, we're better than this. And the meeting, as soon as the meeting ended, the newly elected secretary, a white woman, came up to me and her first words were, it's not racist. Not how are you? Terribly sorry. I was sat there dazed at what had just happened. And she said, it's not racist. And this is what's happening. The racism is explicit, and then you are gaslighted and told, no, you're imagining it. It's not racist. And a number of branches passed motions condemning what had happened. But a number of the more right-wing branches did exactly the same thing. Let's have a debate on whether it was racist or not. So you're re-traumatized by being told something that is explicitly racist. Now, there are actual laws against this. I spoke to a barrister who specializes in employment law, and he said what had happened actually broke the law. And yet we were told it's not racist. And initially, they refused even to investigate it. They even refused to acknowledge that Ekua and myself considered the behaviour to be racist. It was an utter farce. And I believe this kind of activity is deliberate because it takes up so much of your time dealing with it, fighting, arguing, wondering, did I imagine this? That you don't have much time to do much else. And I think that is the function of this kind of racism. It's a distraction. I'm paraphrasing Toni Morrison, but that's what it's about.
So, I mean, Ekua was saying that she didn't have much time for what she wanted to do, which was supporting the residents in Manchester. I mean, is that how you felt as well, that you could have been doing far more as a councillor if this wasn't going on?
Absolutely. So I was a councillor in Ancoats, which is the same ward about which an expose was written recently in The Guardian, about Manchester City Council having gone into partnership with, I think, Abu Dhabi, I might stand corrected, to create a company called Manchester Life, which owns a number of buildings in my ward. And it's registered overseas. So nobody knows where the money goes when all these people pay their rent. And this is a joint enterprise between the council and a regime that a lot of people consider to be extreme. And yet, I didn't have time to deal with that, even though my background is as a planning solicitor. So I was on the planning committee and I thought, okay, this is what I want to work on. This is my area of expertise. I want to make sure that any new developments which are granted permission, particularly in my ward, have social housing, have affordable housing, because Manchester routinely grants planning permission for developments that don't even meet its own criteria for affordable and social housing.
Wow.
So that's the kind of thing I wanted to do, but you're caught up in basically fending off the racist attacks. And I believe I particularly was attacked because I set up something called the Pipeline Project. As Ekua was mentioned, when I joined, I think only 2 out of 96 councillors were from ethnic minorities. No, I stand corrected. Only 2 were African heritage. And given that 15% of the city was African heritage, we were massively underrepresented. So I set up a project. We were funded by the NEC. So this is a Labour Party funded project to increase the number of African heritage councillors. So we did training, mentoring, support, help people practice to be on panel and so on. And I was attacked for that. I was told, you, Marcia, are racist against white people because you've set this project up. When I supported people who had been shortlisted, who had been on the project, I was told by the chief whip that I should consider removing my tweet as I was campaigning against sitting councillors. Now, I don't consider saying congratulations X, who has been shortlisted in Y ward, to be campaigning against a sitting councillor, particularly as I'm the organiser of a Labour Party funded project specifically tasked with increasing the number of black councillors. And it snowballed from there because I refused to remove my tweet. And in fact, I tweeted about the fact that I was now under disciplinary action for supporting black councillors. I was then accused of racism, anti-white racism, by old white men, including Sir Richard Leese, the outgoing leader of the council, and Pat Carney, the secretary of the Labour group. And it's like you've gone through the mirror and you're out the other side, because the normal process, as much as there can be a normal process, is if a councillor is accused of doing something inappropriate, a complaint is made to the Whip's office. The Whip's office investigates, and then only after they have finished their investigation, an email is sent to all councillors telling them so-and-so was accused of X, we've investigated, it's either proven or not proven, and this is their punishment. But in my case, long before any investigation took place, both Richard Leese, the leader of the council, and Pat Carney wrote to all 96 councillors, sorry, all 94 Labour councillors, telling them how awful I was, even though I'd broken no rules. And it just went on for paragraphs and paragraphs. It was so bad that I actually consulted solicitors, and they said, yeah, we think you've got a case for defamation. But I, as a solicitor myself, know that the last thing you want to do is start defamation action. It will just take over your life. And actually, this is all whilst I was off sick with stress caused by all of this. So a new Richard Leese stepped down, so we were going to have a new leader. Whilst off sick, I asked if I could vote for the new leader online rather than turn up in person. And I was formally given permission to vote online. The next day, I heard from the chief whip, since you voted online, it's our opinion that you are well enough to attend disciplinary proceedings. So please give us a date within the next 7 days where you can attend proceedings. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I've given you a sick note signed by a doctor. You are not a doctor, but you are demanding that I come and attend disciplinary proceedings. So it's this kind of, what I kind of say lawlessness, as in, we know what we are doing is unfair, unreasonable, and probably illegal, but nobody is going to judge us on it. I complained to the Whip's office. Clearly, they are going to exonerate themselves. I complained to North West Region. They referred it back to the Whip's office. When Ekua and I were both targeted when we stood as women's officer, we made a complaint to National, and we got exactly the same thing. Oh, it was probably personal, which is definitely rubbing salt in the wound. You're attacked based on race, and the people who are supposed to judge this have said, nah, not really. But it took months of letters but going backwards and forwards before now it was probably personal. And I think the intention of that, because you're dealing with people whose full-time job, they're being paid to do this work. And the work is to stop you doing your work, and you're not being paid. As councillors, we get paid for 2 days a week. And it is designed to grind you down. It is designed to stop you being effective, particularly if you're on the left, because the last thing they want is councillors and probably MPs on the left being effective. And if they can literally tie us up in red tape and disciplinary proceedings, then it's a win, because they know we don't have the time to do anything else.
Yeah, that sounds exactly what Ekua was saying about them trying to demoralise you, and that your politics, your radical politics, or your wish to improve the community was seen as something that they didn't want at the same time. So they can kind of make out that they don't like, it's not racist, it's about the left, but they use racism to undermine your spirit and bring you down. So it is racism because of their tactics. Oh,
absolutely. Completely. It's straight out of the racist playbook, because nobody who is racist in the Labour Party is going to admit it and say, actually, I'm racist. Racism isn't about what you say. It's not about what policies you have in place. It's about what you do. So whenever accused, they'll say, oh, we absolutely abhor racism, like blah, blah, blah. But it's not about anyone can trot out a policy. It's like, what do you actually do when you have black people in your party? And the answer is nothing. not just tolerate the attacks, but we actually orchestrate them sometimes. So unlike Ekua, I don't think I've got the fortitude that she has. I decided to leave when it became clear to me that firstly, I wasn't going to get anything done around planning, which was one of the reasons I'd become a councillor. And secondly, the attacks were intensifying. I thought, actually, this is affecting my well-being. And even though I'm only 6 months in, I have two options. I can sit quietly and take the money for the next 3 years, which a lot of people do after they've been bullied, or I can walk. And I decided to walk. And by walking, I generated a by-election. And you would think that if a black councillor left, putting out a press release saying, I am leaving because of racism, they would bend over backwards to make sure that the selection process for her successor was fair. They went the other way. They actively excluded black members of the Labour Party from the selection meeting, meaning that a white man was selected as the candidate. And this is in a seat that was formally announced as being an all-women seat. So by excluding 3 black members and including 2 white members whose membership subscriptions were not up to date and therefore who shouldn't have been included, they managed to get a tie. And then the next day we were told the white man had been shortlisted, and we were never told how he got enough votes to be shortlisted. As a result of that, because I had no intention of going quietly, Labour lost the subsequent by-election. So in February, a Lib Dem was elected for my old seat by a huge margin. I mean, I left a very, very safe Labour seat. And it's almost as if, given the choice between being racist and losing the seat, they preferred racism. And they almost lost a second seat in the same ward in May, because the candidate in May was the chair of the meeting where black members were excluded. I didn't think she should continue as candidate, but my views don't matter once I've left. But she just scraped through. And this is a seat where I won by, I think I got over 2,000 votes, and the next nearest, the Lib Dems, got 800 votes. So I had a 1,200 majority, or, you know, about 60% of the votes. And they were willing to lose a seat rather than tackle the racism, because had the selection process for my successor been fair, I would have supported my successor. I wouldn't have, you know, gone on record. But even white members of the branch made formal complaints. We heard nothing for months. And eventually we were told, oh, you know, we can't do anything.
Look, I'd love to hear more from you, but can you just let us know what you're up to now? I mean, do you feel better now you're not in the Labour Party and not a councillor for Labour?
Oh, 150%. I have to go at 1:30, so apologies for that. But what I've done is I've written a novel. I started the novel long before I was elected, just because I sort of saw what I was going through in the Labour Party to be so extreme and so beyond the looking glass. And I told someone about it, and they said, you should write a book about that. So I actually started the novel before I was elected as a councillor. And finished it after I was elected, submitted it to an agent. This is quite a large agency in London. And the first agent said, yep, definitely. So I've been signed with an agent. Hopefully the novel will come out next year. And what's ironic is that a number of the incidents in the novel, when it was going through the editorial process, she said, you've got to take some of these out. It's too much. It's too much to be believable. And I said, but it's all true. And she says, yeah, but truth is stranger than fiction. We need fiction here. So literally, I've culled a lot of the material from the novel to make it believable, because if you put it all in, no one would believe it.
That's incredible. Well, it's great to hear you, and I hope you can come on and we can hear about your novel and promote it widely and get it to the #1 in the bestsellers.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. The reason, in a way, we're doing this show is because there's a petition that I'd like you all to have a look at, especially if you're a Labour member. If you're not a Labour member, or if you are a Labour member, I'd like you to share the petition too. This is Black Labour Party members respond to the silent response to the Forde Report allegation 6. The point is, the Labour Party has not replied or responded in any way to the Forde Report, which was out a month ago, And Martin Forde's report indicates a failure of the Labour Party to acknowledge it's breached the Equality Act 2010. Now, this petition has been signed by Lucie Scott and Diane Abbott, and as you can see here, this letter has 375 plus signatures. What I'd like to achieve today is at least 450 signatures, and maybe let's go higher than that when we put this clip out on YouTube. I'm going to put the link to the petition in the chat, but before I do that, I'm going to try to get hold of Lucie Scott. Are you there, Lucie?
Hi. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Lucie. Right, good to see you. So can you tell us a bit about the petition, because I didn't really catch this allegation 6, Forde Report allegation 6. Could you tell us what that is, and also about the Equality Act part as well, because I'm not very legally minded.
Okay, so hi, I'm Lucie Scott. I am the current secretary of the Black Asian Minority Ethnic branch in Hackney North, which is obviously Diane's DLP. I've been very active in calling for the Forde Report. I've waited very patiently for it because the leak Easter 2020 was utterly shocking, but also it wasn't shocking because a lot of us were not surprised at the things that we read in that report. So, you know, the way that it's kind of been kicked into the long grass, we finally got the report released just as we were going, well, I mean, I was breaking up from school, everybody was going on holiday, coming to the end of the kind of the season before we have a month off. And it really felt like that timing was put in place to just kind of like, you know, kind of let's get it out of the way, and we've balanced it out enough for it to be kind of diluted. But for me, as a, you know, an avid document analyst, it was all about allegation 6, which is from like about page 80 in the report. We had to fight to get racism as part of the remit of the inquiry that Forde was going to carry out in the first place. Many Black, particularly African Caribbean members, but, you know, across the range of Black facing anti-Black racism, Afrophobia, Islamophobia, you know, people submitted evidence to that inquiry. So we wanted to, you know, like get the feedback on it. And so allegation 6, you know, it was a fight, but it was included looking at the discriminatory culture. So allegation 6 kind of covers anti-Black racism, sexism. If we look at Diane, for example, misogynoir is the intersectionality of racism and sexism. And what Forde does is he acknowledges what those of us that have suffered and seen ourselves and Diane and other prominent people go through. He basically was able to verbalize and dismantle the denials of people saying, oh, it was a racist. So, you know, fundamentally, it was always about what are the findings going to be. But then when these shocking findings came out, there was a full silent response, which, you know, I've studied institutional racism. Silence is a powerful tool in how, you know, institutions become institutionally racist. So this call from, we got an emergency motion through our CRP general meeting, unanimously passed. But, you know, send an emergency motion, people say it just goes in the bin. So I and other comrades, we met, we discussed, put together the letter. Other Black members across the country put in their contributions, and then we went out on the 1st of August to HQ with the banner that you'll see, like "Your silence is violence," demanding some kind of response, acknowledgement. If you look at how the Cricket Scotland report was presented, it started off by acknowledging and accepting the reality of the racism and institutional failings that many people have faced. And that's what is happening with the Forde Report. And as far as, within the membership, being credible to fight an election, being able to deal with core issues within society, this is just unacceptable that is being ignored. There's just too much to be dealt with around race, Afrophobia, disproportionality from COVID, all of that. So the petition is first and foremost demanding a response, because there's been none. Even a lot of different articles that have discussed the findings of the Forde Report have totally ignored allegation 6.
So I don't even know if Labour's made any acknowledgement of the report generally. Have they done that, but not responded to that? Have they done any acknowledgement of anything?
Well, there was the interview, which is referred to in the emergency motion, of our current leader's visit to Liverpool, and there was an interview on BBC Merseyside. I'm not sure if people watched that, but again, it was unacceptable, sideswiped, and there's kind of a deep-seated feeling of being taken for granted, for us only being good to be doorstep fodder. With like Sister Ekua, I know Andrea's here, like there's just been too much that has happened that is just so unacceptable, racist, So when I talk about breaching the Equality Act, like there has been discrimination. Even the fact that the BAME conference has been deferred, like it was put in the rules from September conference that we would have a conference. We were told that we would be having a conference in November, and at the same meeting that the Forde Report was released, the BAME conference was deferred. So we have no opportunity to put in a motion to national conference for at least 3 years, and have been ignored. Like as much as Marcia's story, like an amazing activist that we should be enabling, has been treated in that way. Like that is the reality of what is happening. It is just so dysfunctional and destructive. Like people need to listen to what we're saying, because people are leaving, people are demoralized. It's just.
Can I just ask you about the petition? People are asking if people who are not members of the party can sign it, or can people sign it if they've been members, or?
If you have left, I think that it's fine for you to sign, and just where it says CRP, say left, and then put your CRP. I am trying to kind of keep it within membership, but again, if you have chosen to leave, you've been expelled or suspended, please feel free to sign in support and just identify that. I didn't want to create a hit list of names. I didn't want people to think, oh, I can't sign, or oh, they sign, I'm not signing, and all of that. So this is more about the volume of signatures. So currently we're in the 420s signatures. We've got signatures from over 100 CRPs, a range of the whole United Kingdom. We've got 4 MPs so far. We've got over 20 councillors that I know of. We've got, great support from allies and, BAME members from across the country that, are supporting this, because part of the problem is that there is an element of fear around this whole situation. We've all kind of been under restriction and having to, be careful that what we say is not implicating us in certain ways. But for me, the bottom line is that, as a member of this party and an anti-racist activist, I have to call out what is blatant to see in front of my face. So, how can I have credibility, and have expectations for, meaningful policy if at the very least you are going to, refuse to acknowledge the findings of allegation 6? It's just shocking. So, we're having a protest on the 2nd of September, 5 o'clock, Parliament Square. But you know, that is to raise awareness. There's a lot more that needs to come out of this when we're thinking about the recommendations, how they're implemented, how they are quality assured, how we actually start to really tackle the disgusting behavior that is, you know, also part of a wider society, but very endemic within this political movement.
Yeah. Look, we're getting people to sign up. We're going to keep doing this, and I hope to have you back on the show another time. Thank you, Lucie, for coming on.
Thank you.
I'm going to speak to Andrea Gilbert now, who's been a regular on this show for over the whole time since we've had lockdown, really. Andrea, you've been out there campaigning on housing. I remember that was one thing you were doing, a lot of work on housing. And then we were really encouraged by the fact that you were selected as a candidate for Labour in Putney, where you worked so hard to get Labour its only gain of 2019. I mean, that's fantastic, that all the work you put into Putney. And I was saying, I'm going to come down there and do some canvassing, whatever it is, leafleting. And then I found out you weren't the candidate in Putney anymore, that your name had been taken off as a candidate. And you haven't spoken about this before.
No, I haven't. So basically what happened.
Can you tell us what happened with Putney, and also what else has happened since?
Right, so yes, as Crispin correctly said, I was selected to be a candidate to run for my ward, West Putney. The campaign was going brilliantly, and yeah, I had made I had got things in as opposition. So for example, I'd won a campaign to get a new crossing put in because school children had been getting run over. We had like 4 children from my daughter's school get run over, and we did a petition and we got that through. There was also campaigns going on about dodgy signals where we are as well, and yeah, we've pretty much got that through as well. The MP's been talking to the mobile networks and putting pressure on them to do something about it. But in terms of what happened to me, well, I received a notice of some kind of an investigation that that I was a member of the Socialist Party. And consequently, after my response, I was expelled and taken out of the campaign. So I obviously didn't run as a candidate anymore. Obviously, I'm not a Socialist Party member, but due to the fact that 2 articles I had written on homelessness and private rent accommodation as well, this had led to me apparently making money for them and supporting their cause. So yeah,
you wrote an article on housing, 2 articles on housing.
Yeah.
They took the article, they put it in their paper without, you know, you're not a member of it. They just took your well-researched work on housing and they put it in their paper, and that was enough to get you thrown off the as a candidate.
Yeah, and expelled as well from the party altogether. Like not even a week had gone by and they had told a group. So obviously I was the secretary of Labour homelessness campaign, and they had told a group in North London that I had been expelled, and they weren't going to share my adverts about the discussion that I was going to have about homelessness locally.
Wow. And you've been doing all this work
Yeah.
locally for the Labour Party, and just for 1 or 2 articles that you had nothing to do with putting in the paper, you've been thrown out of the party and taken off the list as a candidate. What does it tell you about the Labour Party?
Well, it's an absolute mess. Obviously, that was not the only thing that I went through. Like, these people are absolute weirdos. They had basically made up, because they had nothing to go against me, they had made up that I was a sex worker, you know, spread that around the whole CLP that I was a sex worker. They had also said that I was anti-Semitic for sitting on a platform with Naomi Wimber-Idrissi. and Maria Carroll. They had pretty much tried to tarnish my name just due to the fact that I was active and actually making headway in the local area as opposition. So imagine what I would have done as a Labour councillor. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, it is literally their loss, because do you know what? They've got the council, but I've always got the people here. I grew up in Wandsworth. I was born and bred in Wandsworth. So at the end of the day, I'm not losing out on anything, really. In fact, I'm even getting more not being in the Labour Party. I'm doing more in terms of homelessness. I'm getting paid work with crisis. Do you know what I mean? Working on racism in housing. Do you know what I mean? So I haven't lost out on anything. But at the same time, I guess the time and the energy I had put into the Labour Party could have went on to other things, because I was obviously unappreciated, undervalued, and not respected as an activist that was just trying to change my community. I couldn't give a damn about the factional crap. Like, I don't care if you're left or right, because you know what, in Wandsworth, that doesn't matter. They just wanted to see someone that was going to fight for the community and make it better for those that are vulnerable here.
Well, I'm sorry, Andrea, I'm just really gobsmacked by how they've treated you, and also your spirit, because you don't seem to be beaten.
No, beaten by what, man? All these people do is knock on doors to find out who they're voting for. They don't do nothing for the community here. Do you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, like, you know, if you live in Battersea, you've got it good. But here in Putney, you haven't even got an ethnic minority councillor. That's embarrassing. The amount of ethnic minorities in Roehampton alone, there's 55% of the residents are ethnic minority. So at the end of the day, it's not a loss to me, because I'm still here doing the work. These people are still going to come to me and ask me to come to their events and stuff. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't impact me in any shape, way or form. It's going to embarrass them, because at the end of the day, people are going to start questioning them. Well, what happened to Andrea? Do you know what I mean? People are going to start questioning them.
Yeah.
And it did impact them as well in their results, because one of the wards where they had 2 councillors, where my brother lives and where my brothers didn't actually vote, they lost a Labour councillor. So imagine if I open my mouth about, you know, they would have lost it everywhere else as well, potentially, especially in Battersea, where I've got 4 generations of family there.
Yeah, so like Marcia was saying, in Manchester, they lost there because of what she said there. Oh, look, I mean, we all support you in all you're doing, and I have to say, it just shows how bad the party is that we've got a situation like this. Hi, Diane, how are you doing?
I'm fine.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on. You know, we've heard from different people about their experience of racism within the Labour Party and how they haven't dealt with it at all. And the Forde Report came out a month ago with no acknowledgement from the party or the leader, really, about what was said in there. And you've been part of this petition. Can you tell us, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? If you're in the Labour Party, what's the next stage? How can we change this?
Well, it's been a very interesting session. I've heard all of it. I would say I've been in the Labour Party for nearly 40 years. And, I've experienced racism of whatever form or fashion for most of those 40 years. And it's worth reminding people that the Forde Report was actually completed 2 years ago. And the leadership sat on it and tried to put it out at a point where they thought it wouldn't get much coverage. The other thing to say about the Forde Report is that Forde pulls his punches a bit, but all the information is in there. In terms of the response by the leadership, their only response to the Forde Report was to say everything was all right now because Keir is leader, which was extraordinary. They didn't acknowledge what the report said about racism or anything else. Where we go from here is that I think we need to, those of us who are Labour Party members, need to ask for a response to the Forde Report. And we need as well to make sure that party members in general don't fall prey to this idea because you're on the left, you can't possibly be racist. That's part of the Labour Party's problem. They think because they're on the left, they can't be racist. Of course, as we've heard and seen, and most of us know, you can be on the left and be racist. So it's about trying to get a proper response from the Labour Party leadership, and also people on the call giving their support to Black comrades whenever they can.
And this idea that what Marcia was talking about this gaslighting thing, I mean, that is that something that you've encountered a lot, that people say, oh, it's not racist and it's something else, and is that a real tendency of people who are racist to keep pointing the finger at something else?
Well, as I say, there's a lot of people, I mean, some people online here are saying they can't be left. I'm afraid I've come across many people who think they're on the left, who just won't face up to their own racism. As far as they're concerned, racism is something that Tories peddle, but you can find it in the Labour Party as well. And I just think people have to be aware of that.
And to see that this isn't just you as well that's experiencing this, and it's all over the country, locally and nationally. I think we should really make this, everyone on this call should go and share this video when it comes out, and make sure that more people sign the petition, and we get this addressed by the leadership of the party, and that there be some acknowledgement and apology, which is what is being asked for, isn't it, in the petition? Can you tell us what else, what's being demanded in the petition? And
well, I think the demand is, first of all, that some of us get an apology for the terrible things that were said about us. And I have to say, I found what was said about me and the abuse very upsetting, because although I knew the names of these people, I didn't know them personally. So they had no particular reason to abuse me the way they did. And as Forde pointed out, actually, although I was close to Jeremy, there were white male MPs that were close to Jeremy, and they weren't abused in the way that I was. So it was upsetting. And I think it would be good to have some kind of apology. But the other thing is for the Labour Party to look at its policy and what it's doing and make sure it's taking on the issues and what Black people have to say, because I know that a lot of people feel quite marginalised when they're trying to raise issues in relation to racism and discrimination. And very often, I think some Black and brown people feel intimidated for raising these issues because they don't think they're going to be taken seriously. So it's important that the leadership listens to Black and brown people. And it's important that it takes on what Martin Forde's report is saying, even if he pulls his punches a bit, because the Labour Party will be a weaker organisation if it doesn't engage with institutional racism and if it doesn't support its Black members. Because remember, many of our inner city areas, a considerable number of the Labour vote are Black and brown people. And if the Labour Party continues to be dismissive and pretend racism doesn't exist inside the party, in the end, they'll lose those votes. And it'll be very hard to hang on to inner city constituencies if Black and brown people weren't voting Labour.